Not every treasure is made of silver and gold, and not every loss can be counted in dollars. Sometimes, the most expensive thing you lose is the image of someone you loved. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when I watched my own son rob me. From the shadows of the hallway, I saw him. He was struggling, sweating, his breath coming in short, heavy gasps. He wasn't alone. Another man was with him, and together they were dragging the heavy iron chest across the floor of my home. That chest held everything my family had built over 3 generations. Nearly $20 million in antique watches, rare diamonds, and gold bars. I stood there in the dark, silent as a ghost. I didn't scream. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't call the sheriff. I just watched. When my son, Lucas, finally heaved that chest into his van, he probably thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had won. But he was wrong. I had already beaten him weeks ago. You see, a father who truly loves his child must also know how to teach them, even if the lesson breaks his own heart. And the hardest punishment wasn't taking away the gold. It was letting him see exactly who he had become without it. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 80 years old. I live in a large, creaky estate tucked away in the Catskill Mountains of New York. This house belonged to my grandfather, a master watchmaker, and then to my father. It smells of cedar wood, old paper, and the lavender candles my late wife, Clara, used to light every evening. It has been 20 years since Clara passed away, and exactly 3 weeks since I discovered the empty space where my life's work used to sit. That night, after the van drove away, I walked into the back study. The room felt colder than usual. There, on the dusty stone floor, was a clean, rectangular mark, a scar left behind by the chest. It was gone. The chest weighed nearly 300 pounds. Inside were pocket watches my grandfather assembled by hand, gold ingots my father saved during the Great Depression, and diamond necklaces that had once graced the necks of royalty. To the world, it was a fortune. To me, it was history. It was the sweat and honesty of men who never lied, never cheated, and never stole. And that night, Lucas, my only son, dragged it out the back door as if it were nothing but scrap metal. I sat on the floor in that empty room, leaning my back against the cold wall. I stayed there until the sun began to rise. Outside, the birds started their morning song, a sound I usually loved. But that morning it sounded like a funeral march. At 7 a.m., Martha arrived. Martha has been my housekeeper and friend for 35 years. She was the one who bandaged Lucas's knees when he fell off his bike. She was the one who made him hot cocoa after school. She loved him almost as much as I did. She walked into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and then found me sitting on the floor in the study, still wearing my pajamas, my hands covered in dust. She didn't ask what happened. She looked at the empty spot on the floor, then at my face, and she knew. Her expression crumbled. She walked over slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal, and placed her warm, wrinkled hand on my shoulder. "He took it, didn't he?" she whispered. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Martha closed her eyes, and I saw tears stream down her cheeks. She wasn't crying for the money. She was crying for the boy she had helped raise. She was weeping for the loss of a soul. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling," she sobbed. "Don't cry, Martha," I said, my voice sounding rusty and old. "He made his choice. Lucas is 45 now. He lives in Chicago in a penthouse that costs more per month than my father earned in a decade. He calls himself an investment banker, but I know the truth. He wears Italian suits, drives leased sports cars, and wears a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He smells of expensive cologne and anxiety. I know my son. I know the way he taps his foot when he's lying. I know how he avoids eye contact when he's plotting. For the last 6 months, every time he visited, his eyes would drift toward the back study. "Dad," he would say, "this place is a mess. Let me help you organize." Or, "Dad, aren't you worried about security? The world isn't safe anymore." He wasn't visiting me. He was scouting. He was measuring the hallways, checking the locks, planning his route. 3 months ago, he brought a man named Marcus Thorne to the house. Marcus was slick, dressed in a sharp gray suit, with soft hands that had never done a day of hard labor. Lucas introduced him as a security consultant. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus had said, his voice smooth as oil, "keeping assets of this magnitude in a residential property is negligent. You need professional vaulting. You need insurance. We can help you protect your legacy." I had looked at Marcus, then at my son. "I have protected this legacy for 60 years, I told them calmly. "I don't need help." Lucas had clenched his jaw, a tic he's had since he was a teenager. "Dad, stop being stubborn. We're just trying to help." "Help who?" I asked. "Me? Or yourselves?" They left that day frustrated, but I saw the look they exchanged. It was the look of two wolves realizing the fence was too high, deciding they would need to dig under it instead. I thought about Clara often during those days. Before she died of cancer, she held my hand in this very living room. She made me promise her something. "Arthur," she had said, her voice weak but her eyes fierce, "do not give everything to Lucas just because he is our son. Teach him the value of it first. Make him earn it." I had promised her, but after she died, I was lonely. I wanted to believe Lucas was a good man. I wanted to trust him. The night of the robbery, Lucas had come to dinner with his wife, Elena. They arrived late, claiming they were just passing through on their way to a weekend getaway. It was a lie. The getaway spot they mentioned was 2 hours in the opposite direction. Dinner was painful. Elena, beautiful but cold as ice, barely looked at me. She spent the meal checking her phone. Lucas talked about big deals and market shifts, never once asking how I was, how my health was, or if I needed anything. He hugged me goodbye at midnight. "Get some sleep, old man," he said. It felt mechanical. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the silence of the house, waiting. I knew they hadn't really left. At 3 a.m., I heard the back door click open. I heard the soft thud of rubber-soled shoes on the wood. I got up and stood in the darkness of the hallway. I watched as Lucas and Marcus crept toward the study. I watched my son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, become a thief. As they dragged the chest past me, hidden by the shadows, I could smell Lucas's cologne. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It died. It wasn't my love for him. That is a burden a parent carries forever. But my hope died. The hope that I was wrong about him, the hope that he would turn around and realize what he was doing. He didn't turn around. He loaded my life's work into a van and drove away into the night. Martha wiped her eyes and looked at me, her face hardening. "Are you going to call the police, Arthur?" I stood up slowly, dusting off my pants. I looked out the window at the morning sun hitting the trees. "No, Martha," I said softly. "Not yet." "Why?" she asked, confused. "He robbed you." "Because—" I turned to face her. "First, I want him to open it. I want him to see what's inside." Martha looked at me, puzzled. She didn't know the plan. She didn't know that the war was already over, and Lucas had lost before he even lifted the first gold bar. "When he opens that chest," I said, my voice cold and steady, "he is going to learn exactly who his father is." That afternoon, hours after the robbery, the house was quiet. The sun was setting over the mountains, casting long shadows across the floorboards. I sat by the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Henry," I said when he picked up. "It's done." He took it. Henry Ford has been my friend for over 50 years. We learned the trade together, hunched over workbenches with magnifying loupes in our eyes, learning how to make metal breathe. We grew old together, buried our wives, and watched the world change around us. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Henry sighed, a heavy, tired sound. "Arthur, I warned you," he said. "I told you that boy wasn't the same anymore." "I know, Henry. I know," I replied. "But now I have to finish it. I'm going to teach him a lesson he will never forget, even if it costs me the little family I have left." Henry didn't try to stop me. He's a father too. He knows that sometimes love looks a lot like discipline. To understand why I let my son rob me, you have to understand who he used to be. Lucas was born on February 14th, 1978. It snowed that day in Vermont, a rare, heavy blizzard. My wife, Clara, held him and whispered, "This boy is going to be special." He was so small he fit in my two hands. When he opened his eyes and looked at me, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. Not a burden, but a promise. I whispered to him, "I am going to take care of you always." And for a long time, things were beautiful. Lucas was smart and curious. He spent his afternoons in the workshop with me. He would sit on a little wooden stool, watching me polish gems and melt gold, his eyes wide as if he were watching magic. One day, when he was 5, he asked me, "Dad, why does gold shine?" I stopped working and looked at him. "Because it is pure, son. Because it has nothing fake inside." He smiled then, and I thought he understood. When he was 8, he brought me a drawing of a ring, crooked and childish, but detailed. "Dad, when I grow up, I am going to make rings like you," he said. I knelt down and told him, "You are going to be better than me, son. Much better." But life has a way of twisting your plans. Clara got sick when Lucas was 12. Cancer. It was slow and painful. Lucas changed during those years. He became quiet, locking himself in his room. When I tried to talk to him, he would just say, "I'm fine, Dad. Leave me alone." When Clara died 3 years later, the light went out of this house. Lucas didn't cry at the funeral. He stood by the coffin with his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. At 18, he left for Chicago to study business. I wanted him to stay, to learn the family trade, but he looked at me with a strange mix of pity and annoyance. "Dad, that belongs to the past," he told me. "No one works with their hands these days. The future is money, not metal." I watched him get on the bus, and I felt like I was losing him for the second time. Over the years, the calls became shorter. His voice grew harder, colder. At 23, he introduced me to Elena. "She's smart, Dad. We study together," he said. Elena was beautiful, tall, and blonde, but she had a smile that felt like a business transaction. She shook my hand without squeezing it. During dinner, she talked about investments and returns, never about passion or happiness. Lucas looked at her with admiration, and I looked at them both and wondered where my son had gone. They got married 2 years later in a fancy hotel ballroom full of people I didn't know. I sat in the front row, feeling like a stranger at my own son's wedding. But the final straw, the moment I knew I had to do something drastic, happened 2 months before the robbery. It was my 80th birthday. 80 is a heavy number. It reminds you that the clock is ticking. All I wanted was for Lucas to come home. No big party, no gifts. Just him. I called him a week before. "Lucas, Saturday is my birthday. Can you come?" "Let me check my schedule, Dad," he said. He never called back to confirm. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up early. I put on a nice shirt, the one Clara used to say made me look distinguished. Martha had baked a small cake. We put it on the kitchen table, but we didn't cut it. I was waiting. I waited all morning. The phone didn't ring. At noon, Martha set the table with the good silver. "Just in case he comes," she said gently. We ate lunch in silence, staring at the empty chair where Lucas should have been. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was a deep, physical loneliness, like a fist squeezing my heart. 3 p.m., the phone finally rang. I ran to it, my heart racing. "Lucas, Grandpa, happy birthday." It was Sophie, my granddaughter. She is 23 now, studying art in Boston. She has Clara's eyes and a good heart. "Thank you, sweetie," I said, trying to hide the disappointment in my voice. "Is Dad there?" she asked. "No, honey. He didn't come." There was a silence. "Did he call?" "No." Sophie sighed, and I could hear the anger in her breath. "I can't believe him. Grandpa, I'm so sorry." I told her it was fine, lying to protect her from my pain. After we hung up, I went to the garden and sat on the bench where Clara used to watch her roses. The sun went down and still nothing. My son had forgotten me. Or worse, he remembered and just didn't care. That night, at 11 p.m., when I was about to go to sleep, the phone rang again. It was Lucas. Dad, happy birthday. Sorry for the late call. Crazy day at the office. His voice was tired, but not regretful. Lucas, I said, my voice trembling. I waited for you all day. I turned 80 today. Dad, don't exaggerate, he snapped, annoyed. It's just a birthday. Those words hung in the air. Just a birthday. You're right, I whispered. It's just a birthday. Just like I'm just your father. Just like this house is just a building. I hung up on him. I sat in the kitchen and cried like I hadn't in years. Martha held me while I shook. In that moment, I realized the boy who drew me pictures of rings was dead. In his place was a man who only called when he wanted something. The next day, a package arrived by courier. It was an expensive watch, flashy and cold, with a note. Sorry I couldn't make it. Here's something so you remember me. I put the watch in a drawer. I didn't need a watch to remember him. I needed a son. And that was when the visits started. Not for me, but for the chest. He started coming around more, bringing Marcus, talking about protecting assets. He didn't know that on the night of my 80th birthday, while I cried in the kitchen, I had already decided to teach him the hardest lesson of his life. I called Henry the next day. Come to the house, I told him. We have work to do. After my forgotten birthday, something changed. I tried to convince myself I was just being a grumpy old man, that I was overreacting. But the weeks that followed proved me wrong. Lucas started calling me more often, sometimes 3 times a week. At first, my heart leaped every time the phone rang. I thought maybe he felt guilty, maybe he wanted to reconnect. But the conversations were strange. They were brief, cold, and always circled back to the same topic. How are you, Dad? He would ask. And before I could even answer that my arthritis was flaring up or that the garden was blooming, he would cut me off. Listen, Dad, have you thought about that insurance policy? Marcus was saying that keeping assets like that at home is practically asking for trouble. I would sigh, holding the receiver tight. Lucas, I told you. You just don't get it. He would interrupt, his voice sharp. In this day and age, you can't be so careless. Then he would hang up without saying goodbye, leaving me standing in the kitchen with a dial tone buzzing in my ear and a hollowness in my chest. Then came the visits. One afternoon in October, Lucas arrived without warning. He had a thick folder tucked under his arm. He slammed it onto the coffee table. Look at this, Dad, he said. It was full of glossy brochures for armored vaults, security transport, and bank deposits, all bearing the logo of Marcus Thorne's company. I pushed them away gently. Lucas, I don't need this. He hit the table with his open hand. It wasn't violent, but it was loud enough that Martha poked her head out of the kitchen, her eyes wide. You are so stubborn, he shouted. What happens if someone breaks in? If something happens to you? That chest needs to be protected. I looked him dead in the eye. Protected from whom, Lucas? He went pale for a split second. Then he lowered his voice. From anyone, Dad. From anyone. But what hurt the most wasn't the shouting. It was when he stopped calling me Dad. It started subtly. We were in the garden, and I offered him a glass of lemonade. No, old man. I'm fine, he said. I froze. What did you say? He didn't even blink. I said I'm fine. But he had said it. Old man. That word stuck in my heart like a splinter. The second time was worse. We were arguing about the chest again, and he got in my face. Old man, you need to understand once and for all. You aren't fit to take care of these things anymore. I stood up, my legs shaking. Don't call me that. He laughed. A dry, humorless sound. But that's what you are. Old and stubborn. That night, Martha sat with me in the dark living room. She brought me soup, but I couldn't eat. Mr. Sterling, she said softly, placing a wrinkled hand on mine. He isn't the same boy anymore. I know, I whispered. You don't have to put up with this disrespect. You deserve better. What can I do, Martha? Lose him forever. She sighed. Maybe you already have. A few days later, the situation turned from disrespectful to dangerous. Martha came to me, looking pale and frightened. Mr. Sterling, I have to tell you something, she said, wringing her apron in her hands. That man, Marcus, I saw him. Where? Across the street. He was watching the house. When he saw me, he walked away quickly. But before that, I saw him crouching by the back door, looking at the lock. My blood ran cold. My own son's associate was casing my home like a common burglar. I felt watched, spied on, as if wolves were circling the perimeter, waiting for the fire to die down. The final blow came from an unexpected visitor. My family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, called me the next morning. He is a serious man, stiff and formal, who had handled my father's estate. Arthur, he said, his voice grave, I need to see you. Immediately. He arrived at 5 p.m. with his battered leather briefcase. After Martha poured him coffee and left the room, he looked at me with deep concern. Arthur, your son came to my office yesterday. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did he want? He asked to see your will. I felt like I'd been punched. My will? Mr. Henderson nodded. I told him it was confidential, that only you could authorize it. He insisted. He said you were old, that he was your only heir, and he had a right to know. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. But that's not all, the lawyer continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. When I refused, he took out his wallet. He tried to bribe me, Arthur. He offered me $5,000 cash to let him peek at the documents. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the garden without seeing it. My son had tried to buy my secrets. He was counting my days. He wasn't waiting for a visit. He was waiting for an inheritance. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice sounding hollow. The next morning, Martha was cleaning the windows when she heard voices in the garden. Lucas was there, pacing back and forth, talking on his cell phone. She listened, hidden behind the curtains. She ran to my workshop minutes later, breathless. Mr. Sterling, she gasped. I heard him. I heard what he said. Tell me. He said, as soon as the old man dies, it's all mine. I'm tired of begging. We have to act fast before he does something stupid and donates it. I dropped the tweezers I was holding. The metal clattered onto the workbench, echoing in the silence. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. As soon as the old man dies, the words repeated in my head like a curse. My son was waiting for my death. He wasn't a son anymore. He was a vulture circling a dying animal. I walked into the guest room, where I keep Clara's things. I opened a drawer and took out an old photo of us on our wedding day. I whispered to her picture. Honey, I think we failed. You told me to make him earn it. But I just loved him. I thought love was enough. And now, look at what he's become. I cried then. I cried for the death of my son. Not his physical death, but the death of the person I thought he was. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. Cold, hard resolve. I went downstairs to the kitchen at 3 a.m. I made a pot of coffee and opened a fresh notebook. Picked up a pen. The plan. I wrote the words at the top of the page and underlined them twice. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to wait to be robbed. I was going to teach Lucas a lesson. I was going to give him exactly what he wanted, and in doing so, I was going to show him exactly who he was. Step 1, make replicas. Step 2, switch the contents. I looked at the words, and for the first time in months, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of war. At 5 o'clock in the morning, with the plan written in my notebook, I made one final decision. I was going to give my son one last chance. I was going to call Lucas. I was going to tell him everything, no filters, no fear. I would put the ugly truth right in his face. If, after that, he still chose greed over his father, then I would execute my plan without a single ounce of guilt. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Dad. His voice was thick with sleep and annoyance. It's 5 in the morning. What happened? I took a deep breath. Lucas, I have to talk to you. It is important. There was a pause. Dad, I can't right now. I'm sleeping. You're crazy calling this early. Call me later. And he hung up, just like that, without asking if I was okay, without a shred of worry. That click of the phone was the final confirmation I needed. I dialed again. This time he didn't answer. It went straight to voicemail. "Lucas," I said into the machine, my voice steady. "I know what you are planning. I know you want the chest. I know you are waiting for me to die. And I want you to know something. That chest is never going to be yours. Because a son who waits for his father's death deserves nothing. Absolutely nothing." I hung up and waited. I sat there for an hour watching the sun come up. Lucas never called back. He didn't text. He didn't show up. That silence was the loudest answer he could have given me. When Martha came downstairs, she found me in the workshop. "Did you sleep, Mr. Sterling?" I shook my head. "No, Martha. But it doesn't matter. I've made a decision." I showed her the notebook. She read the plan, her eyes widening. "You're going to let him rob you?" she asked. "I am going to let him rob himself," I corrected. "I am going to give him enough rope to hang himself. And when he falls, the whole world is going to know who he really is." Martha nodded slowly, a fierce look crossing her face. "Then I am with you until the end." Sophie, my granddaughter, had stayed over the night before. She came down, rubbing her eyes, and saw the notebook. "Grandpa, this is going to destroy him," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But he chose to destroy himself first. I'm just making sure he learns the lesson." Sophie grabbed my hand. "I'll help you. Whatever you need." That afternoon I called Henry. "Henry, get your tools. I need you to do something I have never asked you to do." When Henry arrived, wearing his old straw hat and a worried expression, I locked the workshop door. "I need you to make replicas," I told him. "Exact copies of every piece in the chest. Every gold bar, every ring, every necklace." Henry looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Replicas? William, what for?" "To let my son steal them," I said. "I'm going to swap the real treasure for fakes. I'm going to send the real jewels away to a safe place. When Lucas opens that chest, he is going to find glass and brass. And he is going to understand exactly who I am." Henry sat back, stunned. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "Arthur, that is brilliant. And painful. It's the only way," I said. "If I call the police now, he'll say I'm a paranoid old man. I need proof. I need him to commit the crime." For the next 2 weeks, Henry worked day and night in my workshop. It was like the old days, but with a dark twist. He melted cheap metals, carved glass to look like emeralds, and aged new copper to look like antique gold. He was a master artist. "You know," Henry said one evening, polishing a fake diamond ring, "I never thought I'd use my skills to deceive a thief, especially when that thief is your son." "I didn't think I'd reach this point either," I replied. Finally, the replicas were ready. Henry brought them in a wooden crate. We laid them out on the table next to the real ones. They were perfect. They shone the same, weighed the same. Only an expert with a lab kit could tell that the gold wasn't pure and the stones were just colored glass. "Henry, this is a masterpiece," I told him. I tried to pay him, but he refused. "This is for friendship," he said. "And for justice." That night, with Martha and Sophie helping, we made the switch. The real jewels, $17 million of history, were packed into sealed suitcases. Sophie was leaving for Switzerland the next morning. She would deposit them in a safety deposit box under the name of a charitable foundation I had secretly created in Clara's honor. The chest, now filled with fakes, looked exactly as it always had. But before I locked it, I took a piece of paper and a pen. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from rage and disappointment. I wrote, "What you were looking for was not gold. It was power, and that was never in this chest. It was in your heart, and you lost it a long time ago. Your father." I folded the note and placed it at the very bottom of the chest, buried beneath the fake gold bars. "Do you think he'll read it?" Sophie asked. "Maybe," I said, turning the key in the heavy iron lock. "Maybe not. But I needed to write it." Sophie left for the airport that night. "Take care of them, sweetie," I told her. That is the true legacy. Not the gold, but what we do with it. I won't fail you, Grandpa, she promised. When she was gone, the house felt very quiet. Martha and I stood looking at the locked chest. Now what, Mr. Sterling? She asked. I sat down in my armchair, feeling a strange sense of peace. I wasn't a victim waiting to be robbed anymore. I was a teacher preparing a final exam. Now we wait, I said. We wait for him to take the bait. And when he does, he is going to fall into his own trap. For days passed after I locked the chest filled with replicas. For days of absolute silence. Lucas didn't call. He didn't visit. Nothing. I went about my normal routine. I had breakfast with Martha. I worked in the workshop polishing old silver, and I sat in the garden in the afternoons. But everything felt different. The air felt heavy, charged with static, like the moments right before a thunderstorm breaks. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. Every night, Sophie called me from Switzerland. Grandpa, everything is safe, she would say. The jewels are in the deposit box, the documents are signed, and the foundation is registered. I would breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you, sweetie. Now we just wait. And waiting was the hardest part. I knew that at any moment, my son was going to deliver the final blow. On the 5th day, a Tuesday afternoon, Lucas finally appeared. He arrived alone. No Marcus, no Elena, no entourage. He didn't have that air of arrogance he usually carried like a shield. He knocked on the door gently. Martha opened it and gave me a warning look as I walked out of the workshop. I saw him standing in the living room. He was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, his hands buried in his pockets. He looked softer, more human, more like the boy I remembered. Hi, Dad, he said, his voice quiet. Hello, Lucas, I replied, standing in the doorway. Can we talk? I nodded and we sat down. For a split second, just a heartbeat, I felt something dangerous. I felt hope. Lucas looked at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. Dad, I have been thinking a lot about us, about how we drifted apart. He paused, and I listened in silence. I know I have been hard on you. I know I said things I shouldn't have. And I am sorry. Something moved in my chest. A feeling I thought was dead and buried. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. I looked at his face, searching for my son. Lucas, I started to say, but he raised a hand to stop me. Let me finish, Dad. I nodded. In that silence, a part of me prayed that what came next was real. That is why I want to help you, he said. And there, in that single sentence, the hope died. Help you wasn't I love you. It wasn't I miss you. It was a transaction. He kept talking faster now. I want you to be calm, Dad. I don't want you worrying about that chest or security anymore. I spoke with Marcus. He has everything ready. We can transfer the chest to a professional facility. Armored, insured, everything. It was the truth, finally. He hadn't come to apologize. He hadn't come to reconcile. He had come to close the deal. He was doing it in the most cowardly way possible, disguising his greed as love, dressing up a robbery as an act of charity. I let him speak. I watched his mouth move, spilling beautiful words that hid dirty intentions. Dad, I will take care of everything. You don't have to lift a finger. Just give me permission. Sign the papers, and that's it. When he finished, silence filled the room. He looked at me, waiting for a fight. He expected me to say no so he could argue, so he could manipulate me further. But I didn't say no. I said the one thing he didn't expect. It's okay, son. Lucas blinked, stunned. What? I said yes. I repeated, my voice calm and firm. You are right. I am old. I can't take care of these things anymore. If you want to take charge, go ahead. I saw his eyes light up. I saw his mouth twitch into a smile he tried desperately to hide. Dad, thank you. Really, thank you for trusting me. He stood up and hugged me. I let him do it. I felt his arms around me, but I didn't feel warmth. I felt a lie. I felt the embrace of a stranger who happened to have my last name. I'm going to coordinate with Marcus, he said, pulling away, practically vibrating with excitement. We'll come pick it up in a few days. Does that sound good? Sounds good, I lied. He left quickly, getting into his car and driving away. I stood in the doorway watching the dust settle, knowing that was likely the last time I would see him as my son. When he opened that chest and found the fakes, he was going to hate me. He would want to destroy me. But I didn't care anymore, because I had already lost him. Martha came out of the kitchen. Her eyes were red. He took the bait, didn't he? It is done, Martha, I said. Now we wait for him to rob himself. I went back to my workshop and looked at my tools, the hammers and pliers used by my father and grandfather. 3 generations of honesty, I thought. And my son destroyed it all in a single generation. That night, Lucas called. He sounded euphoric. Dad, Elena wants to say hello. He put me on speaker. Mr. Sterling, Elena's voice chirped, fake and sweet. So glad you accepted. Lucas is very happy. It is for the best, I said flatly. Then Marcus spoke up. Mr. Sterling, I'm sending the papers by courier. We just need your signature. We'll come by Friday to pick up the chest. I felt nauseous listening to them plan the heist right in front of me, treating me like a senile fool. Fine, I said. See you Friday. On Thursday, the papers arrived. They were full of legal jargon, but I read them carefully. They didn't say secure deposit. They said transfer of temporary custody. It was a legal trap. Once I signed, the chest would legally be under Lucas's control. He could sell it, melt it, or throw it in the ocean. I called Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. Arthur, do not sign that, he warned immediately. It is a scam. I know, I sighed, but I am going to sign it. Are you sure? Completely. Trust me. I signed the papers, put them in the envelope, and left them on the hall table. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, watching the clock tick. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow Lucas would come. He would take the chest. And I was going to let him do it without fighting, without screaming. Because this war wasn't going to be won with strength. It was going to be won with intelligence. I walked into the back study one last time. The moonlight hit the closed chest, making the iron gleam. I ran my hand over the cold metal. It was heavy, but empty of spirit. Tomorrow, son, I whispered into the darkness. Tomorrow you are going to learn exactly who your father is. Friday dawned gray and cold. Heavy clouds hung low over the mountains, blocking out the sun. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, though I hadn't really slept. I showered, dressed in my usual clothes, and went down to the kitchen. Martha was already there, brewing coffee in silence. We looked at each other, and no words were necessary. She knew exactly what was going to happen today. Mr. Sterling, she said softly, do you want me to stay with you? I shook my head. No, Martha. Leave early. I don't want you to be here when they come. She hugged me tight. You are the strongest man I know. I didn't feel strong. I felt tired. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else keeping me upright. The cold steel of justice. Lucas called at 9 a.m. Dad, we are on our way. We'll be there by noon. I just said, okay, and hung up. The hours dragged by. I sat in the garden, looking at the gray sky, thinking about Clara. I thought about her dying wish. Teach him to deserve it. She was right, as always. I was finally doing what I should have done years ago. I wasn't teaching him with lectures or advice anymore. I was teaching him with consequences. At 12 o'clock sharp, I heard the engine of a vehicle coming up the driveway. It wasn't Lucas's shiny black sports car. It was a large white van, ready to haul heavy cargo. Ready for the robbery. 3 people got out. Lucas, Marcus, and to my surprise, Elena. She almost never visited. She hated the countryside. But today she was here. Today was payday. They knocked on the door. I opened it. Lucas was smiling that practice smile. Hi, Dad. I didn't smile back. Hello. Marcus was holding a briefcase. Mr. Sterling, here are the signed documents. Everything is legal. Everything is in order. I stepped aside and let them pass. They walked in as if they already owned the place. Elena looked around, her eyes scanning the room, calculating the value of everything she saw. Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Where is the chest?" he asked. I pointed toward the back study. "In there." Lucas put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it gently. "Thanks, Dad. Really, this is for the best." I didn't answer. I just watched them. In my silence, there was a goodbye he didn't hear. They went into the back room. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame like a ghost in my own home. Marcus took out some tools. He and Lucas grabbed the iron handles and lifted the chest. It was heavy. They grunted from the effort. "Careful," Elena snapped. "Don't hit it against the wall." They carried it slowly through the hallway, through the living room, and out the front door. I followed them, silent, witnessing my own misfortune, or perhaps my own revenge. It depended on how you looked at it. They reached the van and opened the back doors. They slid the chest up a metal ramp, secured it with heavy ropes, and slammed the doors shut. Just like that, in less than 15 minutes, they took what they thought was my fortune. Lucas walked back to me. He hugged me again. "It's done, Dad. Now you can be calm." I let him hug me. I stood stiffly, saying nothing. He pulled back, looking satisfied. "I'll call you tomorrow to let you know it's safe in the deposit." Elena kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. "A pleasure, Mr. Sterling," Marcus said, shaking my hand. They got in the van, started the engine, and drove away. I stood on the porch, watching the dust kick up behind them as they disappeared down the road. They were taking the chest, they were taking the replicas, and they were taking their own sentence. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, quiet peace. Suddenly, I heard a sob from above. I looked up. Martha was in the second-floor window, crying. She hadn't left. She had stayed hidden, watching everything. I went upstairs to the guest room. She was sitting on the bed, her face buried in her hands. "Mr. Sterling, I saw it all," she cried. "I saw how they took it like thieves." I sat beside her and put an arm around her. "It's over, Martha. It's over." She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "How can you be so calm?" I looked her straight in the face. "Because I already punished him, Martha. He just doesn't know it yet." That afternoon, I called Mr. Henderson. "Arthur," he answered. "It happened," I said. "They took the chest." There was a silence on the line. "Do you want me to file the report?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, but not just as a theft. I want it registered as family betrayal. I want it in the newspapers, on the news, everywhere. I want Lucas Sterling's name to be marked." Mr. Henderson hesitated. "Arthur, that is going to be very public. Very painful for you." "I know," I said, closing my eyes. "But it is necessary. If I don't do it, he will go on believing he can do whatever he wants without consequences. That ends today." "Understood," he said. "I'll file the report first thing tomorrow." That night was the longest of my life. I wasn't afraid, but I was anxious. I knew what was coming. Lucas was going to open that chest. He was going to try to sell the pieces. And at some moment in the next few days, his world was going to crumble. I sat in the dark living room, looking at Claire's photo on the mantel. "Honey, I did it," I whispered. "I taught him. I don't know if he will learn, but I tried." The next day, Saturday morning, the report was filed. Mr. Henderson didn't just go to the local police. He went to the district attorney with photos, Martha's testimony, call logs, and the evidence of the bribe. The report accused Lucas of grand larceny and elder abuse, stealing a fortune valued at $17 million through deceit and manipulation. The news hit the press in less than 2 hours. Local papers ran it that afternoon. By Sunday, it was in the national news. My phone didn't stop ringing. Journalists, neighbors, people I hadn't seen in 20 years. Everyone wanted to know. I didn't answer anyone. I just waited. I waited for the one call I knew was coming. It arrived Monday morning. I picked up the phone. It was Lucas. His voice sounded desperate, bordering on hysterical. "Dad, what did you do?" he screamed. "Everyone is saying I robbed you. This is crazy." I listened in silence. "Dad, I only wanted to help you," he shouted. "I didn't rob you. The chest is safe. It's in the deposit like we agreed." I waited for him to stop screaming. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was calm, cold as ice. "Lucas, open the chest." There was a stunned silence. "What?" "Open the chest," I repeated. "And then call me back." I hung up the phone. I sat down in my chair and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a judge who had just delivered the final verdict. 2 days passed without a single word from Lucas. 2 days of silence that felt heavy and absolute, like the air inside a tomb. I sat in my chair by the window, watching the leaves fall in the garden, knowing that thousands of miles away, my son's life was unraveling. I didn't need to guess what was happening. I could feel it in my bones. On Tuesday night, the phone finally rang. It was Sophie calling from Switzerland. Her voice was breathless, almost frightened. "Grandpa, I just saw the news," she said. "The police in Antwerp issued an alert. They are looking for 3 Americans who tried to sell jewels of suspicious origin." My heart kicked against my ribs. "Antwerp?" I asked. "Yes, Belgium," she confirmed. It seems Dad didn't waste any time. I hung up and stared at the wall. Antwerp, the diamond capital of the world. Lucas had gone straight for the biggest market, thinking he could liquidate the fortune quickly and disappear. He had been so greedy, so desperate, that he hadn't even checked the merchandise first. Wednesday morning, Mr. Henderson called. He sounded agitated, his usual calm demeanor gone. "Arthur, they found him," he said. "The Belgian police detained Lucas, Elena, and Marcus." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I felt I had been holding for weeks. "Tell me everything." Mr. Henderson recounted the details he had received from the authorities. It was a story of arrogance crashing headfirst into reality. They had walked into a prestigious appraisal house in the Diamond District, a place where millions of dollars change hands every day. They asked to see the head appraiser, a man named Peter Van Houten, an expert with 50 years of experience. Lucas was confident. He placed the gold bars and the velvet pouches of gems on the table. He probably thought he was minutes away from being a multimillionaire. Van Houten put the first piece, a gold bar, under his microscope. He weighed it. He scratched it. He performed a chemical test. Took less than 5 minutes. He looked up at Lucas over his spectacles and said 3 words that shattered my son's world. "This is fake." "Impossible," Lucas had shouted, sweating. "Check the rest." The appraiser picked up an emerald necklace. He looked at it through his loupe, checked the refraction of the light, and shook his head. "Dyed glass," he said. "Worthless." One by one, he examined the rings, the bracelets, the brooches. Every single piece was a perfect replica, beautiful to the naked eye but hollow inside. According to the police report, Lucas lost control. He started screaming, slamming his hands on the table. "My father tricked me. That old man tricked me." In his desperation, he confessed. When Van Houten asked where he got the items, Lucas yelled, "From my father's house in America. They are mine by inheritance." But Van Houten wasn't stupid. He had already seen the international alerts. The news of the son who stole his father's fortune had crossed the ocean. He quietly pressed a silent alarm. In less than 10 minutes, police surrounded the building. Lucas, Elena, and Marcus tried to leave, but they were blocked at the door. They were handcuffed, read their rights, and dragged out in front of a crowd of tourists and shoppers. But the worst part came at the station, Mr. Henderson told me, his voice grim. While they were waiting in the holding cell, Elena turned on him. I gripped the phone tight. What did she say? She screamed at him in front of the officers. She yelled, "You promised me millions. You told me we were going to be rich. And you brought me to this country with fake jewelry like an idiot." Lucas tried to calm her down, begging her to stop, but she was past the point of pretending. "There is nothing to fix," she had shrieked. "Your father humiliated you. He made you look like a thief and a fool." And then she said the thing that I had suspected for years. "I married you for the money you were going to inherit. And it turns out there is nothing. Nothing." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My son heard the woman he loved admit she only wanted him for my money. She asked for a lawyer immediately, Mr. Henderson continued. She claimed she knew nothing about the theft, that Lucas had deceived her, that she was a victim. Because there was no physical proof she helped move the chest, they let her go. She took the first flight out, not to New York, but to her mother's house. Lucas was left alone in a cell in a foreign country, abandoned by his wife, realizing he had lost everything. The guard reported that he cried for hours, repeating over and over, "I lost everything." "And Marcus?" I asked. Mr. Henderson laughed bitterly. He was even more of a coward. He tried to cut a deal. He told the police he was just a hired consultant, that Lucas planned it all. But Marcus has a record 3 previous scams. They didn't believe a word. He's being extradited along with Lucas. The news exploded in the media the next day. The headlines were brutal. Son steals family fortune, but chest is empty. The thief who robbed himself. Father teaches greedy son a $1 million lesson. Social media was on fire. People I didn't know were commenting on my life. Some called me a genius. "That is how justice is done," they wrote. Others said I was cruel. He should have talked to his son instead of humiliating him. I didn't read the comments. I didn't care about the opinions of strangers. I only cared about one thing: that my son learned the lesson, and that the world finally saw him for who he really was. 3 days after the arrest, I received a call from a journalist named Bridget. She worked for a major national newspaper. "Mr. Sterling," she said gently, "I know this has been a difficult week, but I would like to hear your version. If you don't speak, others will invent things." I hesitated. I hate cameras. I hate attention. But Mr. Henderson nodded at me from across the kitchen table. "She's right, Arthur. Tell your truth." I accepted. Bridget came to the estate on a Friday afternoon. We sat in the garden, surrounded by Clara's roses. She turned on her recorder and asked the question everyone was asking. "Mr. Sterling, why did you do this? Why didn't you simply report him to the police before he took the chest?" I looked her straight in the eyes and answered with the absolute truth. "Because I needed him to condemn himself," I said. "If I had reported him without proof, he would have said I was a crazy, paranoid old man. But this way, caught with the chest in his hands, trying to sell the pieces, he cannot deny anything. He wrote his own sentence." Bridget paused, her pen hovering over her notebook. "And the replicas? How did you make them?" I smiled a small, sad smile. "I have friends. Friends of a lifetime. People who know the value of loyalty, unlike my son." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you feel guilty? Do you feel like you betrayed him?" That question stung. I took a deep breath of the mountain air. "Miss Solano, I did not betray my son. He betrayed me," I said firmly. "I only taught him something I should have taught him years ago, that actions have consequences. You cannot steal from your father and expect nothing to happen. Greed destroys. Gold can be recovered, but dignity cannot." The interview with Bridget appeared on the front page of the Sunday paper. Above the fold, there was a black and white photograph of me sitting in my garden, looking at the horizon. The headline was bold and simple: "Dignity cannot be bought." Bridget had kept her word. She wrote exactly what I had told her, capturing the pain and the necessity of what I had done. After that article was published, the atmosphere in town shifted. People who had looked at me with pity or confusion now looked at me with respect. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in years stopped by to shake my hand. Strangers approached me in the grocery store. "Mr. Sterling," a young man told me in the checkout line, "what you did took guts." I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I owned my name again. I had recovered my dignity, and that was something no one could steal. A week after the interview, I decided it was time to close the book on the missing fortune. I called Mr. Henderson. "Arrange a press conference," I told him. "I have something important to say." He organized it at the local town hall. Journalists from all over the state arrived, their cameras and microphones creating a wall of noise. I walked in with Sophie holding my arm. She looked strong, just like her grandmother. I sat down in front of the crowd, the lights blinding me for a moment. "Good afternoon," I began. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 80 years old, and I am here to end the speculation." The room went dead silent. As everyone knows, my son Lucas attempted to steal a chest containing family heirlooms valued at $17 million. What he did not know is that the real content was no longer there. It had been substituted by replicas. I paused, looking at the sea of faces. Many have asked me where the real treasure is. Today, I am going to answer that. I took a breath. The real assets are in Switzerland, in a safety deposit box registered in the name of a foundation I created in honor of my late wife, Clara Sterling. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. "This foundation has a single purpose," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "To rescue family businesses, watchmakers, jewelers, artisans, who are facing bankruptcy. We will use the $17 million to provide interest-free loans and scholarships to young apprentices. We are going to save the trades that are disappearing." Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. I saw Bridget in the front row, smiling at me. "My son believed that gold was his future," I said, looking directly into the main camera. "But his future was never in the gold. It was in being an honest man. He lost that a long time ago. I hope that someday he recovers it, because the true legacy is not what you keep in a chest. It is what you give away." I stood up. The applause started slowly, then grew until the whole room was standing. Sophie had tears streaming down her face. I didn't cry. I just nodded and walked out, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had done the right thing. Clara would have been proud. The legal consequences followed quickly. Lucas's trial took place 3 months later. I didn't go. I couldn't bear to see my son in handcuffs, humiliated in a courtroom. Mr. Henderson went in my place and kept me informed. Lucas pled guilty. The judge, considering the circumstances and the fact that the theft technically involved fake items, though the intent was real, sentenced him to 2 years of probation. He wouldn't go to prison, but he had conditions: mandatory community service, psychological therapy, and a restraining order preventing him from approaching me. Marcus wasn't so lucky. Because of his prior criminal record for fraud, he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. As for Elena, she never even showed up to the hearings. She divorced Lucas by mail. No trial, no arguments. She simply signed the papers and vanished from his life, proving that her vows were only as strong as my bank account. Evan, the former colleague who had warned me about Lucas in the parking lot that night in New York, called me after the sentencing. "Mr. Sterling, justice was done," he said. "Thank you for warning me, Evan," I replied. "Thank you for having the courage to listen," he laughed. 6 months passed. Half a year of silence. Lucas didn't call. He didn't write. I went on with my life. The Clara Sterling Foundation started its work. We saved 3 small watch repair shops in the city and gave scholarships to 10 young artists. Every time I saw Clara's name on a plaque or a document, I felt like she was still here with me. I spent my days in the workshop or the garden. The anger I had felt was gone, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I had lost a son, but I had saved a legacy. One Saturday afternoon, the air was crisp with the approaching autumn. I was in the front garden, pruning the rose bushes that had grown wild over the summer. I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. I looked up, expecting the mail carrier or maybe Sophie. It was an old, battered yellow taxi. It stopped in front of the house, the engine sputtering. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was thin, pale, and had a messy beard. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans that looked worn. He wasn't wearing a Swiss watch. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit. He looked broken. It was Lucas. He walked slowly toward me, his head down. I placed the pruning shears on the garden table and wiped my hands on a rag. I didn't move toward him. I just waited. He stopped a few feet away. We looked at each other in silence. A heavy silence filled with everything that had happened. Every lie, every betrayal, and every tear. "Dad," he said finally. His voice was different. It wasn't the arrogant boom of the businessman. It was soft, cracked, and humble. I didn't answer. I just watched him. He took another step, his hands trembling. Dad, I came to ask for forgiveness. And then, he did something I never thought I would see. My son, the man who thought he was above everyone, sank to his knees in the dirt. There, in the middle of the garden where he used to play as a child, my son knelt in the damp earth. The knees of his jeans were stained with mud, but he didn't seem to care. He didn't look like the arrogant businessman who had called me old man weeks ago. He looked like a child who had lost his way in the dark. "Forgive me, Dad," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. I was wrong about everything." Tears streamed down his face, cutting through the grime on his cheeks. "I lost everything, Dad. Elena is gone. My friends won't talk to me. My reputation is destroyed. I have nothing." I looked down at him. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I felt a deep, crushing sadness. It is a specific kind of pain to see your own child destroyed, knowing that you were the one who had to let the destruction happen because it was the only way to save his soul. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Dad, please say something," he begged. "Scream at me. Hit me. Do anything. But please, don't look at me like that." I crouched down slowly until I was at his level. I looked him straight in the eyes. "Son," I said softly, "I forgave you a long time ago. I forgave you before you even took the chest." He blinked, confused. "What?" "I knew you were going to do it," I explained. "And I knew this moment would come. I had to forgive you beforehand, or I wouldn't have been able to go through with it." He let out a choked sob. "Then, does that mean everything is okay? Do you forgive me?" I sighed, looking at the gray sky reflecting in his eyes. "I forgive you, Lucas. But there is something I cannot give back to you." "What, Dad?" he asked. "The money? I don't care about the money anymore." I shook my head and put my hand on his shoulder. Felt thin. "Your name," I said. "You lost your name on your own." Lucas closed his eyes as the weight of my words hit him. "Your name, Lucas, is no longer the same," I continued gently. "When people hear Lucas Sterling, they won't think of the business school graduate or the investment banker. They are going to remember what you did. The betrayal, the theft, the greed. I cannot erase that for you. Only you can erase that." He kept crying, his shoulders shaking. "How, Dad? How do I recover it?" I stood up and offered him my hand. He looked at it for a second, then reached out. I pulled him up from the dirt. "Don't ask me for forgiveness, son," I told him. "Ask yourself. Forgive yourself for the man you became, and start doing the work to become the man you could have been. Work hard, help people, build something real, and maybe, someday, when someone hears your name, they will think of something good." I paused, feeling the finality of the moment. "But I probably won't be around to see that. That is a journey you have to walk alone." Lucas lunged forward and hugged me tight. He held on desperately, burying his face in my shoulder like he used to when he was afraid of thunder. I let him hug me, patted his back, but I didn't hug him back with the same strength. Something inside me had broken that night in the workshop when I realized he was stealing from me, and it hadn't fully healed. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. He pulled away, wiping his tears with his sleeve. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. "For everything. For the lesson. For not giving up on me." I nodded. "Take care, son." He turned and walked slowly toward the waiting taxi. Before he opened the door, he stopped and looked back at me one last time. "Dad," he asked, his voice trembling, "are you ever going to be able to look at me like before?" I took a deep breath of the cool mountain air. I owed him the truth. "I don't know, Lucas," I said. "Honestly, I don't know." He nodded, accepting the answer. He got into the taxi, and the car sputtered to life. I stood in the middle of the garden, watching the yellow car disappear down the winding road. For the first time in months, the heavy weight in my chest was gone. I didn't feel pain anymore. I felt relief. I had spoken my truth. I had protected my legacy. And I had given my son the only thing of value I had left to give. a chance to start over. A few weeks later, Sophie came to visit me. But this time, she didn't come alone. She brought her son, my great-grandson. He was a 3-year-old boy named Leo, with huge curious eyes and a mischievous smile that reminded me of Lucas when he was that age. Leo ran toward me across the grass with open arms. "Grandpa Artie," he squealed. I picked him up and spun him around. He laughed, a pure, joyful sound that echoed through the garden. I hugged him close, smelling the scent of baby shampoo and sunshine. In that moment, holding that little boy, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Sophie watched us, smiling with tenderness. "Grandpa, he loves you so much." "And I love him," I said. I looked at Leo, who was busy trying to grab a flower. "When he is old enough to understand, I am going to tell him the story of the chest. I am going to tell him that true gold is not something you lock away in a dark room. True gold is not kept. It is given away. I will teach him that fortunes can be lost in a second. Markets crash, thieves steal, and metal rusts. But dignity, if you take care of it, if you polish it with truth and protect it with honesty, dignity lasts forever." Sophie came over and hugged me. The 3 of us stood there in the garden, bathed in the warm autumn sunlight. The house behind us was quiet, no longer haunted by ghosts of betrayal. I knew then that despite everything, despite the pain, the public scandal, and the heartbreak, something good had come out of this. I had saved the family name. I had recovered my dignity. And that is something no one, not even my own son, could ever take away from me. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And God knows, it hurts. It hurts like nothing else in the world. But that pain also teaches us. It teaches us who we really are. It teaches us what we are willing to tolerate. And most importantly, it teaches us that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can always control who we see when we look in the mirror. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 81 years old, and I am finally at peace.